and thank you for joining us during these 16 days of activism to discuss this important issue. You are known for being a vocal advocate of equality and women's rights, including the right to live free from fear of violence. Why is this an issue you've chosen to focus on?
Well, it really came to me. I was surprised. I was on the Armed Services Committee, and some constituents called and said there was an issue with people who were deployed, that they couldn't get access to abortion services easily. And that even in cases of rape, they were denied. And I thought, wow, that's pretty bad. And so I started to work with Jean Shaheen on fixing that. And then I got asked by a few other constituents that I really had to look into this issue of sexual assault in the military, that there was a problem here and the cases weren't being handled properly. And I said, yes, I'll look at it. And it kept coming at me. More and more people kept raising it. And then finally, a friend hands me a video and says, you need to watch this video. It's called, it was a film specifically about sexual assault in the military, and you need to understand how bad it is. So I watched the film and I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how bad it was. That's what started me focusing on this issue. And so when I got asked what subcommittee I wanted that year, I immediately said, I want personnel. And so I began a journey to really uncover why sexual assault in the military is so problematic and why it's been so hard to fix. Through that work, I wound up having 2 young women knock on my door in my Senate office saying they wanted a meeting. And I sat down with them and they said, Senator, we know you care about sexual assault in the military, but, we were assaulted on college campuses and the same thing happened to us. They not only disbelieved us, but they retaliated against us because we reported the rapes. And you need to do something about college campuses. And so then I realized, wow, this is a problem that is universal. It is prevalent in the military, at home, at school, and we have to deal with it. That also then led to, what do we do about sexual assault and sexual violence and sexual harassment in Congress? And how do we make our workplace safe? And then how do we deal with sexual assault and harassment in other workplaces? How do you make sure that we don't have these non-disclosure agreements that are mandatory when you sign an employment contract? So now I'm an expert in all of these things. And it's because the issue just kept coming to me. And the more I learned, the angrier I got, and the more incensed I became that something had to be done. And so now I'm working on multiple fronts with legislation.
Well, the Senate's lucky to have you and your passion. It's interesting that you say the issue came to you. It came to me too when I walked into this VA facility. Tell us a little more about what Congress did in an era of toxic partisanship, where Congress does almost nothing, at least as those of us perceive it from the outside. Of course, when I was inside, I thought it did quite a bit, but the amount of partisan votes is staggering, especially on important things. Yet Congress passed this bill by overwhelming margins. How did that happen?
Well, in the military sexual assault context, we have had bipartisan support across the board. In the House, they've had robust bipartisan support. In the Senate, I've not had a vote on it in 4 years, but the last time we did have a vote on it, we had 55 votes. And that's rare in Washington. And I have not only, Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren on the bill, I also have Rand Paul and Ted Cruz on the bill. So it is widely bipartisan. And what we realize is that sexual assault affects everyone, and what's standing in the way is the status quo. And so anyone who is willing to take on the system of power, whether it's on a college campus or in the military or in corporate America, if you're willing to take on the powerful elite or these closed institutions, whether you're taking on the church, the Catholic Church on pedophilia, or whether you're taking on the NFL on domestic abuse, or you're taking on the college campuses of America, those are all institutions that have unfortunately over time protected predators. And so we've been very lucky to have enough reform-minded Democrats and Republicans in Congress to begin to take on these issues. So far, we've not actually accomplished changing the status quo in any of these places, but we've built bipartisan coalitions that I think now under a Democratic president, we will finally get a commander-in-chief who wants to make these changes.
And she, it may be a she in this case, will presumably be very effective at advocating for that bill. But let's just stick on Congress for a minute, because Congress has its own workplace harassment
Yes.
bill. And it has its problems.
Yes.
I saw those up close and personal. But didn't it pass legislation aimed at Congress?
Yes,
How was
we
that
did. Yes,
working?
yes. Sorry, I missed that distinction. Yeah. So what we realized is that in Congress, if someone's being sexually harassed by their boss, a member of Congress, not only did that person have trouble reporting the problem, but they would then have to have a mandatory 1 month cooling off period before they could even report it. And then a 1 month training period before they could report it. And so it was really made very difficult. And so once all these examples came to light, and the fact that when a member of Congress was accused, they could pay off their accuser and make them sign a non-disclosure agreement, we realized there were members for many decades that had lots and lots of cases against them and had paid people off. So we then decided that those payments had to be transparent, that there had to be a streamlined process where anybody could report and not have to have a waiting period or a cooling off period or education period. And they also they mandated mandatory arbitration. So it was just all set up to just help the accused. And so we reformed that and changed the rules completely. And the rules aren't perfect yet, but they're deeply reformed and significantly better than they were before.
Is there a way to track this in Congress now?
Yes,
not
there's
just the complaints, but somehow the metrics for, I'm not sure what they are, for success. Hopefully they prevent this, or at least reduce this in some measurable way.
Yes, so they do have to be transparent. There is a place where they're reported, and I don't know exactly where that place is, but it's they used to have a yearly report of just overarching numbers. Now there's 100% transparency, and in fact, it has to be disclosed if you have a settlement in your office.
Wow. Well, do you think it makes a difference? I would argue yes. I just made this comment about a potential candidate for Secretary of Defense. Do you think it makes a difference that 26 members of the Senate are female? Does that help
and
resolve
frankly,
this problem?
If someday we'll get to 51%, Jane, 51% in Congress, we're still a ways away. But you know, it's not surprising that it took 7 women on the Armed Services Committee in the Senate to finally get real votes and real reform being debated in the Armed Services Committee. We have less tolerance for the status quo when we know it fundamentally harms the ability of women not only to succeed in the military, but to get seniority and to actually get promotions. It really holds back whole classes of women. Yeah. And so
go ahead.
Yeah, so it's important because if we want to have the kind of leadership that I think allows for the most talented people and the greatest skills brought to bear, you're going to need to have that kind of diversity.
Well, first, let me say the Wilson Center is a majority female staff. Something I pointed out to you before, and many of our programs are led by females, including the one leading this effort, this 16-day celebration. I think it does make a difference. Your comment about 51, wouldn't it be nice to get to 51 female senators? Why not more? I mean, I say we're a majority of the population, so therefore we're a majority of the talent pool. And if we want the Senate to be smarter, we have to elect more women in both parties.
And women are known through studies that they tend to be more bipartisan. They tend to be better at collaboration, better at listening, better at consensus building. And so we're more prolific legislators, in fact. And so if you did have more women in the Senate and the House, you would have a more effective Congress.
But it is also true that a number of supporters of this legislation happen to be men, and that's a good thing on a bipartisan basis. And I mentioned that I worked with a man in the House when we got our provision about the Pentagon in the defense appropriations bill. Let me just ask you a few more things here. Let me ask about the Violence Against Women Act. That was an initiative of Joe Biden's when he was a senator. It was an initiative in 1990. He talks about it regularly. It has to be reauthorized, I think. And I'm wondering how high a priority you think this will be for the Biden administration, and what will the Senate do?
I think it's a very high priority. VAWA expired in February 2019, and the House passed a reauthorization bill in April 2019. The Senate Republicans have refused to allow a vote on the bill because the NRA opposes the boyfriend loophole, which is the intimate partner loophole. Whereas you have to be married. Well, you can't, for a lot of places, a lot of states, it's a states' rights issue too, you can only get a restraining order against a spouse. You can't necessarily get it against a boyfriend or an intimate partner. And you can't also, if there's been violence, you can't get guns taken away if it's not your spouse. If it has to be, if it's just a boyfriend, you can't. It's just harder to get action against someone you're not married to. And so the boyfriend loophole is you can't hold a boyfriend accountable if they've committed violence against you in the same way you could if you were married.
Wow. So what do you predict? That it'll get reauthorized, but what happens to this
I'm
loophole?
hopeful that Biden and his White House will be more active in whipping and getting the support that's needed to actually reauthorize VAWA. And I think when you have the White House, you also have the bully pulpit. So we can describe why these loopholes are absurd and why the NRA should not be fighting for abusing boyfriends to be able to own guns or to not have their guns taken away if they abuse their girlfriends. So I think it's very important that we have the White House, because the White House can bring up those stories and explain why voters should care and why, therefore, moderate senators who are Republican should also care.
Well, I assume a lot of this violence happens in households where the people are Republicans. I don't know that
happens
violence
everywhere. It happens in red
against
places, blue places, and purple places. Yeah.
And the other thing we have learned at the Wilson Center, and you obviously know this too, is with COVID-19 and these quarantines, the amount of violence has increased, didn't decrease, because people are home more and have no opportunity to escape each other. And sadly, we need much more effort to teach young men and young women. I mean, sometimes this violence can go the other way, woman against man, or young woman against young man, but nonetheless, to teach people that this is wrong behavior. Some of them learn this from their environments. So what is your agenda? Just to close, your personal agenda in the next session of Congress with respect to this issue, where you are the power? So
the first thing we want to do is pass Military Justice Improvement Act in the Senate and in the House. We want to actually call the vote, get a vote. I want to get the rest of the undecided Democrats to support the bill. There's only a handful of them. And then work with my Republican colleagues who do support the bill to get a few more. I have a couple of senators that we're trying to rewrite the bill together who are Republicans so that we can garner more support. And then Mitch McConnell already supports us. So just getting Mitch to call a vote will be important. So I'm just hopeful that if Joe Biden supports this measure, which I believe he will, that he will urge the few Democratic holdouts, including the chairman of the committee, Jack Reed, to allow for a vote on this issue. And that is how we pass it.
And so that's your priority. What are Jack Reed's arguments against the bill?
He supports the perspective of the generals that you don't want to make commanders have any less responsibility. But what we know is that only 3% of commanders have this responsibility. And when other jurisdictions like the UK and Israel and Australia and Germany took these decisions out of the chain of command, they saw no diminution of command control or good order and discipline. And in fact, it's just letting a more expert person make the decision. So we would like trained military prosecutors to decide whether or not a case should go to trial, not a commander who knows nothing about criminal justice law and may have bias in their decision making.
You know, I see this, maybe I'm missing something, as a military readiness issue, which I would think would appeal to everyone who wants the best military we can field. Because if women are at risk.
So tying up commanders' time to focus on them is absurd. Why would you do that? You wouldn't tie up a commander's time to focus on surgery. You would give that to the surgeon. This should be given to a lawyer, a real criminal lawyer who is a prosecutor. So it's tying down commanders with responsibilities that they're not very good at. And unfortunately, under Trump, we've seen the prosecution rate decline. And we've seen the number of cases that have gone to trial has declined, but the number of actually rapes has increased. So they're going in all the wrong direction. And I would like to give this job to someone who is trained to do it better.
Well, the statute of limitations hasn't run on the cases from the Trump administration. I guess we're still in the Trump administration.
Yeah,
So can they still bring those
They
cases?
could be reviewed. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
So let's hope that in the nearest future, you will win big, because this issue, again, doesn't have a party label on it. And it doesn't only have a female label on it. It is urgent business. And at least in the military context, it's a readiness issue. And in the college campus context, we didn't talk about that enough.
And so
Let's
on
just go
college
there.
campus,
Yeah,
again,
it's horrible.
we have a widely bipartisan bill that Mitch has not let us vote on. And I just need a president who cares about this issue to help me make it a priority for Democrats. And then with that, I can then garner more Republican support. But I need to close out all Democrats. And if I have a commander in chief who supports both reforms, that's how you get unanimity amongst Democrats. And then you can shave off just the 2 or 3 additional Republicans you need. It's not many, because we have a dozen Republicans already. Well,
You're fierce on the tennis court as well as in the Senate, but you're also very accomplished in terms of understanding how the Senate works. And you also were in the House. So this is less of a problem. I assume passing this stuff is easier in the House.
Yeah.
And it might be easier if there's a Democratic Senate. We don't know that yet.
Yes, we still have those 2 Georgia seats. So you never know.
We do. So you never know. But the point is that this issue came to you. It picked the right person to come to, because you really bring huge skill and passion to it. And this couldn't be a better keynote for the events we're planning at the Wilson Center. And I just want to salute you and wish you total success. When we have this conversation a year from now, I want you to tell me we got the military bills passed,
yes,
we got the college bill passed, and we're doing more to make sure this never happens again in the United States Senate, right?
Yes. Thank you, Jane. God bless you. And thank you to the Wilson Center.
And happy and safe holiday to you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
God bless. Take care.
Bye-bye.